And welcome back to the channel. Mr. Acolyte here, coming at you with my complete how to play guide for Asuka. Asuka is my favorite character in this entire game. I've been playing him for a long time. I've played many versions of this character, as he is probably one of the most changed characters in this entire game. And as you all know, in 2.0, he received an entirely new rework. So he has a whole new playstyle. So I've been digging in deep ever since the patch came out. And by now I feel like I have a really good understanding of how he's supposed to be played going forward. And that's the information that's going to be contained in this guide. So I've broken this guide down into two parts. Part one will be Asuka as a character. And that section will break down all of his mechanics, his cards, special moves, all that good stuff. Will break down all the information you need to know about Asuka as a character. And then in part two, we're going to break down how to actually play him in matches. This is probably the biggest guide I've ever done. Asuka is probably the most complex character I've ever covered. So if you could leave a like on the video for this jumbo size guide, I would really appreciate it. If you want to see more guides like this in the future, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of the upcoming action. I also stream most nights here on YouTube and also on Twitch. I stream pretty much all fighting games, so be sure to stop by and check that out. But with all that being said, there is a lot to talk about, so let's not waste any more time and jump right on into it. All right, part one, Asuka's tools. This is going to be the section where we break down Asuka as a character. That way you have a full understanding of how he works before we break down how you actually play matches with him. So to start with, what kind of character is Asuka? Put it simply, he is the ultimate resource character. Playing Asuka is sort of a tightrope walk because you have to play the opponent, you have to play the game's natural mechanics, and you have to play his own built-in mini card game. So obviously doing all that at the same time is quite complex and quite demanding, which is what makes him such a deep and interesting character. But of course, that is the point of this guide, to make Asuka as easy to understand as possible. And I can assure you, by the time you get to the end, you'll know more than enough to be able to pilot him effectively. So let's begin breaking everything down step by step, starting with Asuka's unique icons. So starting with the card bar, probably the most important part of the character. The card bar decides what attacks are available to you. When the round starts, you'll always see 4 different random icons here, and this is every single round start. So whenever the round starts, these icons will be different. So part of the fun of Asuka is the fact that you never really know what's gonna be available to you even when the match starts. So every round start with him is always going to be different. To the left of that is your mana bar. Your mana bar is just as important as the card bar because you need mana in order to spend cards. So if I wanted to cast the spell in that first slot, it's going to cost me a little bit of mana. And you can see every single time I spend a card, it costs mana. So again, these two bars go hand in hand and they decide how and when you're able to attack. The number next to the mana bar is a little complex. We'll get more into that later, but all you need to know right now is that is the number of cards available to you. Every time you refill a card in your hand, that number goes down. And that's basically to let you know how many cards are left in the deck. Again, and this is something we'll talk about more in an in-depth section, but for now, in case you're curious, that's what that number actually means. And the number behind that icon represents your current deck, also known as a test case. Think of a test case as a stance. Asuka has 3 unique decks, or 3 unique stances, you could say, each with individual types of cards in them. You are able to switch to these freely, and when you switch, the icon switches with it to let you know what deck you're currently in. So in test case 1, the icon is sort of a moon with a ring around it. Test case 2, same thing, it's a moon with 2 rings. Test case 3 is a moon with 3 rings. So it's very easy to tell which test case you're currently in, and that's very good because which test case you're in is very important because that decides which cards you are able to currently attack with. So now that we know exactly what all the icons on the bottom left mean, let's go into more detail and break down how to actually utilize all this information. Starting with the card bar. Once again, this is where 4 random cards will always appear around start. And in order to spin them, you have to get used to utilizing all 4 different slots. So this is going to be the first hurdle. If you're brand new to Asuka, this is going to be the first hurdle to actually learning him, and that is getting comfortable with the slots. So each slot is designated to a button. The first slot being P, the second slot being K, third slot is S, and fourth slot is HS. So if you do 2, 3, 6 in one of those 4 inputs, it will spin the card in that corresponding input. So 2, 3, 6P, 2, 3, 6K, 2, 3, 6S, and 2, 3, 6H. This will be the first thing I recommend you practice because it's very, very important that you get to the point where you can easily look at any slot and be like, okay, I want to use that now. Like, let's say that I want to use the move in the third slot. It's extremely important that in the middle of a match, I can just instantly go, oh, that's ready. I'm in the right spot to use it. Boom. You don't want to be in a situation where you're thinking about it or you're delayed, or the worst action is you want to use the move in slot 2, but you end up using the move in slot 1 and either wasting it or getting counter hit or something bad. So that's my first piece of advice. Get comfortable in knowing where the slots are and get your fingers used to hitting the exact slot that you want on demand as quickly as possible. Now, of course, casting spells isn't the only thing you do with the card bar. You're also going to be constantly bookmarking, also known as reloading. When you cast a spell, it's going to leave that corresponding spot empty until you actually properly reload it. This is done with 2, 1, 4 and whatever input of that empty slot. So in this case, it would be P. So 2, 1, 4 P, and I will refill that spell. You have to do this every single time a spell is cast. The game will not refill slots for you. So this is something that you also have to get good at and keep an eye on constantly, because it's very, very important that you actually have spell cards available, because obviously if your slots are empty, there isn't much you can do without an actual spell card on hand. But that's not to say that you are helpless. As of the 2.0 revision of Asuka, they went ahead and gave him a brand new move that is only able to be used while a slot is empty. Previously, if a slot was empty, you could do nothing. But a slight buff to his kit is now if you try to cast a spell with the empty slot, you get a new move. This is basically an empty spell. It works as a pretty weak poke, but we'll get into more about how to use it, but just keep in mind that this is what you will get if you do not reload your cards. Next, let's go more in depth about the mana bar. In some ways, the mana bar is even more important than the card bar, because the mana bar kind of dictates the entire character of Asuka himself. It's going to have a massive weight on all the decisions you make at every point in the match. We already talked about how when you spend a card, your mana goes down. This is also true of reloading a card. Any action that you take basically is going to cost you mana, and it's going to make your mana go down. So always keep an eye on that, because again, the amount of mana you have is going to heavily dictate what kind of cards you're going to use, and a whole lot of other things that we're going to talk about later. Now, something extremely important to take note of that I haven't yet mentioned is you are not the only one that can lower your mana. Believe it or not, the opponent can as well. Every time you take any sort of damage, you will lose mana. As you can see from just a simple throw, I lost a healthy chunk there. So as you can imagine, combos do even more. This is what makes Asuka a very punishing character to play, because unlike most characters where getting hurt only costs you health, getting hurt with him actually costs him his resources. So more so than other characters, make sure that you highly focus on strengthening your defense when you're playing Asuka. Now, of course, there are ways of getting your mana back. When your mana is depleted, you can always get it back by pressing 2-2-S. This will mana charge. The mana charge is fairly slow, but it is still a decent way of recovering your mana. But the last thing of note about charging that we will mention here in this section is distance. Mana charge, believe it or not, is affected by your distance to the opponent. The further away you are, the slower the charge is. So if I'm full screen like this, let's take a look at how long it takes me to refill most of my gauge. Pretty long time. As you can see, the gauge is barely even moving. However, if I am very close to the opponent, let me try to get it to a similar level. However, if I'm close to the opponent, you'll notice it goes up much faster. This is basically to incentivize you to go on the offensive with Asuka. Obviously, they don't want you to just sit in a back corner and just throw cubes at people, quickly get your mana back and throw cubes. This is the devs' way of saying they want you to play more from here and less from the other side of the screen. Now, let's talk about what happens if you don't charge your mana and you actually end up running out. Even if your mana is at 1%, you can still cast whatever cards you want, but in exchange, it will put you into the state known as burnout. So right here, you can see I am burned out. My card bar is X'd out, meaning I can't use any cards no matter what, and my mana itself is regenning. This is a huge and massive change to the character because previously you can only be put in burnout by your opponent's attacks. However, now Asuka chooses when to go into burnout himself, and this fundamentally changes how he's played. We'll go into that more in depth in the how to play section, but for now, just keep that in mind that once you run out of mana, you go into the state known as burnout. But that's not all there is to the burnout state. Obviously, most people notice the huge blue bar around Asuka's health bar. This comes from his mana, believe it or not. So as long as Asuka has mana, he has that protective shield around his health bar. And that protective shield is not just for show, that is actually a barrier. Asuka, when he has the barrier around his bar, is actually one of the highest health characters in the game. He takes highly reduced damage, so that is the reason why attacks chip away his mana, because his mana is tied to his health. So what happens when you go into burnout is you lose that bar, and when you're in this state, you take basically double damage. We'll talk more later about how to play around burnout and all that good stuff, but for now, just make sure you understand that burnout really is a big deal, and it is very, very dangerous. Moving on to test cases. As we talked about earlier, the test cases are the different stances that Asuka has available to him. You always start in test case 1 when the round starts, and whenever you want, you can always switch to test case 2 or 3 by inputting down HS. When you do down HS, Asuka will do this little animation here. During that animation, you can switch stances at any time by pressing the corresponding button. P will put you in test case 1, K, test case 2, and S, test case 3. So it's very easy to quickly shift to whatever test case you want, depending on whatever situation you're currently in, or whatever card you're currently looking for. We're gonna go way more into depth in the test cases later on, but for now, all you need to know is that test case 1 is the zoning deck, test case 2 is the mix-up deck, and test case 3 is the crazy deck. Whichever deck you end up using is going to be up to you as a player, as they are all very, very different from each other. Next up, it's time to talk about another new mechanic, and that is Asuka's staff mechanic. Now, staves are a new big part of his game plan. He had staves before in the vanilla version of Strive, but back then they used to be cards. They were cards that you would have to draw. That is no longer the case. So you don't need cards and you don't need to look for staves. You simply put them down whenever you want. This is done by either pressing down P or down K. You get 2 staves per test case. So whatever test case you're in, this input will put down staff 1 and staff 2. We'll talk more about the properties of each staff and all that good stuff later on in the guide. But for now, all you really need to know are that staves affect how your spells act. So anytime you have a staff down, it will give your cards different properties. This is a huge change, and it's definitely a welcome buff, and it is pretty much the biggest thing that separates vanilla Asuka from 2.0 Asuka. All right, so now that we've covered all of the basics of Asuka's mechanics, let's bring it all together by finally talking about the main aspect of Asuka himself, and that is his chanting mechanic. We talked earlier about how you do 2-3-6 button to cast a spell, 2-1-4 button to reload it, 2-2 button to put down a staff or to recover mana or to switch stances. Now, those are a lot of different distinct inputs that all do different things, but the cool thing about Asuka as a character is that chanting gives him ability to literally chain all of his special moves together. To give an example, let's say that I wanted to cast the card in the first spot and the card in the second slot. So you might think that in order to do that, I would have to do 2-3-6P and then 2-3-6K. That's actually not the case. Thanks to chanting, all you have to do is press the last input of whatever it is you want to do. So since 2-3-6 allows me to cast a spell, if I want to do a second spell, all I have to do is press forward in the corresponding button. So for this example right here, for the first and second slots, I'm going to do 2-3-6P and then simply forward K. And as you can see, I quickly and easily canceled the first spell into the second and even cut off the recovery. Chanting is basically the whole idea of Asuka's offense as a character. It's what makes him so dangerous because he basically doesn't have to stop and he can kill his own recovery until he runs out of mana. This is basically, chanting is the reason why he has mana to prevent you from just attacking forever. And it doesn't even stop there. If you're fast enough with your chants, you can even spend your entire hand all in one motion. And of course, that's not the only thing you can do with a chant. You can cancel a cast into just about anything. Like let's say that I wanted to throw a card and get some mana back. I would do 2-3-6P and then simply hit 2S, and that would instantly cancel my casting animation into a mana charge. You can probably already tell that by utilizing this, you can get very creative, because whether or not you throw another cube, you back off, you mana charge, it's all up to you. And the fact that you can cancel these animations into each other gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of creativity. What if I wanted to reload? You could probably imagine by now, basically the same thing. I would do 2-3-6P and then 4P. And as you can probably guess, you can take it even a step further. You can cancel a reload into another cast. So once you get comfortable enough and fast enough, you should be able to channel everything together all in one smooth motion. Now, that's not to say that it is without limitation. There are a few small limitations in place, notably the mana charge. If you chant into a mana charge, that becomes the end of the chant. So if you are planning on using it, try to save it for the end, because that is going to lock you out of any further animations. For example, if I throw the card in my first slot here and then mana charge, I'm not going to be able to reload. And I should also note that yes, you can chant into your different stances and your staves. So let's say it's round start. I'm in test case 1, but I'm a test case 3 enjoyer. If I want to chant into test case 3, all I have to do is cast a spell to get started, hit down H, and then S, and that will shortcut me directly into test case 3. And just like that, I smoothly transitioned into test case 3 under cover of another spell, and I'm ready to get started, and all my spells will be test case 3 spells now. This is also true of staves. Normally putting down a staff has a pretty big animation on it. So just like with anything else, I can cast a spell and then quickly do down P or down K, and This even works if you start with the staff. It should be noted that you can chant on the ground or in the air. Another strength of Asuka is that he can do most of his actions in the air. The only things he cannot do are mana charge and place a staff. But if you want to switch test cases, or if you want to cast a spell, or reload a spell, or chant, you can do all of these things in the air. However, you do have to be grounded to get your mana back and to put out a staff. So as you can see, there is a ton of depth to just chanting alone. So this is something I would also recommend just getting used to. Being able to quickly recognize what spell is in what slot, as I mentioned before, and then being able to chant are two of the most important factors you should master when wanting to start to play Asuka, because without those two skills, it's going to be very, very difficult to pilot this character effectively. All right, so by now we should have a really good understanding of the basics of Asuka's mechanics. So let's go ahead and move on to the next most important topic, and that is his actual spell. Asuka has more than 30 unique spell cards, each of which you're going to have to memorize and know exactly what they do, so that once again, when they pop up in that bar on the bottom left, you're going to be able to use them quickly and efficiently. So in order to get there, let's go ahead and take it step by step, one by one, and break down each of his individual spell cards. So let's go ahead and talk about Asuka's most well-known spells, that being the cubes. Asuka's cubes are pretty unique projectiles in the sense that while they are projectiles, they can be destroyed by the opponent's attacks. Any normal button or special move, as long as it comes into contact with the cube after its startup, can destroy it. This is what basically balances him out as a character and prevents him from just basically zoning everyone to death. In total, Asuka has 6 different kinds of cubes, starting with the most basic being the water cube. This is a very basic projectile. Think of it as your Hadouken. More than anything, it's just a simple poke. The best thing about it is fast. It is one of the fastest cubes that you can throw. While it doesn't have the best block stun or the best hit stun, it is reliable to get your offense started, and it is one of the harder cubes for the opponent to react to, especially at a close range. Moving on to the lightning cube. This is basically the opposite of the water cube. This one has a very slow startup. It takes a little while for Asuka to actually throw it, so it's a bit more reactable. This is the kind of spell you would want to cover with a water card first. However, the big benefit of this one is it is extremely plus on block. It's so plus that in most situations, you can reload, mana charge, and still run up to the opponent before they can act. So anytime you want to buy yourself some time or you want to initiate a mix-up, Lightning Cube is the way to go. Moving on to the Wind Cube. This is your official neutral cube. Throwing this one will throw 3 different cubes all at once that get taller as they spread out. As you can probably imagine, this card is amazing at neutral. Due to the fact that Asuka is obviously a projectile-based zoner, the opponent is going to constantly be jumping at you and attempting to jump over your cubes. And in most instances, it's not very hard for them to do that. But with the trajectory of the Wind Cube, it keeps most opponents at bay from just about any angle. Next is the Flame Cube. This one is one of the most powerful projectiles in his arsenal. As you can probably already notice while I'm talking, this is a cube that powers itself up. When it first enters your hand, it starts at level 1, and gradually over time, it will power itself up to level 5. Now, the number and the level correspond to how many cubes will be thrown. At level 1, it throws a single cube. At 2, 2 cubes, 3, so on and so forth. I think you get the point from there. Basically, this card is extremely powerful once it gets to level 5. With the cube so far, we talked about specific scenarios where they're pretty strong. You know, the water cube being a good poke, lightning cube being good for block strings, wind cube being good for neutral. Well, you see, the thing about the fire cube is that it's good at everything. As you can see, once you're at level 5, this cube is pretty monstrous. It's just as wide as the wind cube, it's just as fast as the water cube, and it has just as much, if not more, block stun than the lightning cube. So this is what I call one of those all-in-one cards, and anytime you have a fire cube available, I would highly recommend waiting to level 5 before you use it, because it is just really, really strong in any instance of the match once it hits that level 5. Moving on to one of my personal favorites, the big cube. As its name implies, this one just throws a really big cube. The strength of this one is kind of all in one, close to the flame cube. However, the weakness of this one, the weakness and strength of this one, I should say, is that it's extremely slow. So the big cube is not very powerful at neutral because obviously this is going to be extremely easy for any opponent of any skill level to react to. However, when you're fairly close, the fact that it moves so slow is a massive benefit because it locks the opponent in block stun for a long time. So once this is out, again, you have a lot of options here without even losing your turn. You can go for mix-ups. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this. So again, much like the flame cube, this is just a powerful cube that has a lot of resource to it. And last, but certainly not least, the king of cubes, that is of course the Hell Zone. This one, I'll just let speak for itself. Yeah, pretty much that. As you can imagine, this one does it all. Neutral, lockdown, pressure, mix-ups, you name it. This is Asuka's most powerful attack card. The benefits are too many to name. When we get into the how to play section, we'll go over all the different ways you can utilize this one. But yes, this card is just flat out amazing. The only real weakness to it is that it has a very slow startup. But obviously, once it is actually out and about, this card is insanely effective. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next category of spell cards, and that is the elemental spells. Elemental spells are quite different from cubes in two main factors. The first being that elemental spells are all relatively short range, so you got to be pretty close to utilize most of them. But the trade-off is, while they all are pretty short-ranged, none of them can actually be attacked. They all function as true projectiles, so they are very powerful once you actually get close to the opponent. Starting with the Ice Spike. This summons a small pillar of ice in front of Asuka. The startup is fast, and it comes out a pretty good distance in front of them, so it's pretty good at catching opponents who are running up to you, or even catching buttons in general. It's also pretty good while jumping backwards. It's not very strong on block. It leaves you at very little advantage, if at all. So definitely be careful trying to recover resources or going for an unsafe chant off of this. However, if it does actually connect with the opponent, the reward is huge because it fully freezes them on hit. As you can see, it's almost exactly like Dizzy's Ice Pillar. The opponent is frozen, relaunched, and re-stunned no matter what they were doing before. You can even launch them up for a combo, freeze them, and then still continue the combo after they're frozen. Next up, the Fireball. This one unleashes a very fast, close-range explosion. While you do gotta be kinda close to get the full benefit of it, as you can see, it puts out a massive dome that is actually pretty good at even catching jumps. So this move is just all around very good for getting your offense started. If you have one of these and you just kinda wanna make it your turn, it's not a bad idea to dash in range and kinda just throw this out. because not only does it have like this wide area in front of Asuka that it covers, but it also, if you didn't notice, guard breaks them. So it's very, very plus on block, has a pretty big dome in front of him, so this is a very good offensive attack. Moving on to the electricity card. This one summons a quick bolt of lightning directly in front of Asuka. This one is similar in use to the fireball, with the idea that it comes out very fast and covers the direct area in front of him and guard breaks. Now, what sets this card apart from the fireball and gives it more identity is the fact that it has a level system. If you notice, each of the electricity cards that I have at the bottom there all have a number attached to them. When you first get the card, or should I say when the round starts, electricity always starts at level 1. But as you cast more spells, the game keeps track of how many spells you've casted per round, and that number will gradually go up. So basically, simply by chanting and playing Asuka, this card passively gets stronger. So the longer the round is going on and the more active you've been, the stronger this card gets. So the more the level goes up, the more the block's done. So you see, this is level 1, this is level 2, level 3, and then finally we'll just skip to level 5. You can see that with each level, the block stun is going up. But if you were paying extra close attention, you'd also notice that the damage goes up. Once you get to level 5, this card hurts. You can see that just off of chip alone, it did a chunk. So this is a very threatening and rewarding card. If you actually connect this on the opponent, the damage is pretty impressive. Next up, the Rock Spike. This is by far one of the best elemental cards because, as you can see, it has very generous range for an elemental. It covers a lot of distance in front of Asuka, and it is very, very fast. But the most important factor of this attack is that it is an actual low. I have Jam set to block high right now. She's stand blocking, but if I do the spike, instantly launched. So this spell is good in a variety of situations because it forces the opponent to block low. So it is very powerful for your mix-ups, and it's very good in neutral in situations where your opponent is trying to move away. Just all around, anything that forces the opponent to duck is very, very strong. And saving the best for last, we have the overhead card. That's just what we call it, and that's because, to put it simply, it just summons an overhead. This card is very, very fast. It's easily one of the best cards in Asuka's entire arsenal. It's easily his best elemental for numerous reasons. As you can see, it is extremely generous with its range. It tracks the opponent, comes out almost instantly. It's very, very hard to react to it. And of course, as I just stated, it is an actual overhead. So if the opponent is ducking, they immediately get launched. This is your most powerful mix-up tool with Asuka. When opponents are fighting you, they have to look at your hand to make sure this card is not there. And once they see it, that only adds to the mix-up. This card becomes even more powerful when you combine it with the low Rock Spike. You can imagine that with these two, an overhead and a low, his mix-up potential can be very, very high. The next category is mana spells. As the name implies, these are spells that help you preserve or recover your mana. So first of all, there are 3 different types of mana cards. Each card is unique to each test case. So test case 1, you get a different mana card from the ones that you get in test case 2 and 3. Now, what makes them very rare is that there's literally only one in each test case. So remember earlier when I talked about the number to the left of your mana gauge, that's where this number comes in. So since there's only one of these, once you start shuffling your deck, that number on the left will help you figure out how close you are to getting it if you haven't seen it in a while. So if I sit here and shuffle, there it goes. So I just got it right there. Now if I get rid of it, I'm not gonna see it again until I get all the way through the entire deck. And see that now that we've started over, let's say that I had spent it and I'm looking for it again. Now that I can see that we started over, eventually I know I'm gonna get to it because there it is. So basically that's where that number comes in. If you're looking for a particularly rare card, it can help you in the middle of a match figure out if you are close to it yet. So let's go ahead and talk about the actual mana spell card. So for test case 1, you get the reduced mana cost card. When you cast this one, the color of your mana bar will switch to orange. This signifies that the spell is active. Once it's active, it will reduce the cost of all spells cast. So just to do a quick comparison, if I empty my hand here, you can see I end up with that much mana. But with reduced mana, a lot less. So once this card is up, you can kind of go crazy and continuously cast for a good while before you'll actually run out of mana. Next is the instant mana card. This one is found only in test case number 2. This card, as the name implies, instantly gives you mana back. So if I use these cards to get my mana down a bit, and then I spend the instant mana card, boom, I quickly get a big chunk of mana. This card is very, very valuable, obviously because it gives you mana back quickly. So the recommended use for it is to wait until your mana is a little bit low, probably like when you feel like you can only cast one more spell, cast it, get the mana back, and now you'll be good to go for a couple more casts. And last but certainly not least is possibly the best card in the game as of version 2, and that is the Mana Regen card. When you pop this one, your mana bar will turn green. This signifies that your mana is now recovering completely on its own. So during that time, as long as the bar is green, you can spend spells and the bar will just fill itself back up, making this the most valuable card in Asuka's entire deck right now because of how hard it is to get your mana back. When this card is active, you are effectively playing the vanilla version of Asuka for a few seconds because you just get to cast and cast and cast until it wears off. Okay, moving on to the next category, that being bookmark spells. Bookmark spells are very similar to mana spells, except for the fact that they don't affect your mana, they only affect your cards. The focus of a bookmark spell is to help you quickly refill your hand so you can either recover some of your resources or continuously go on the offensive. And just like with mana spells, there are only 3 bookmark spells, and each one is unique to each of the 3 test cases. Starting with test case 1, we have Full Import. This card instantly refills any empty slots in your hand. So let's say that I go ahead and empty my whole hand except for Full Import. Ordinarily, I'd have to go one by one and re-chant all of these 3, which takes a lot of time and mana, especially individually. But with the power of Full Import, I can immediately get my hand back to 100% full. Obviously, this is a very, very powerful tool because you don't have to spend all that time refilling your hand. You can instead focus on recovering your mana. In any situation where you recognize you have this card, it's a good idea to basically give up on reloading. Because of the fact that Full Import will do the heavy lifting for you, you can either A, focus more on offense, or B, what I like to do, focus more on recovery. So now that I know I have a Full Import, I don't actually have to manually recover any of these cards. So whenever I throw a card, like let's say I throw this water cube, I can mana charge because I don't need to fill that slot. So I can throw that mana charge, throw this mana charge, and then now, boom, I'm full back on cards again. Ordinarily, you have the pressure of spend a card, recover a card, spend a card, recover a card, spend a card, get some mana back, have a dead spot. But with this card on your side, it kind of lightens the load, and now you can know, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about refilling my hand because it's going to get refilled anyway. Test case 2 has the Random Import card. This card works similarly to full import, but with one key difference. It not only will fill in any empty spots just like full import, but it also has the huge added benefit of simply shuffling your entire hand. So if you ever get into a situation where you just have a handful of cards that you don't actually like or don't want, boom, you just have a different hand now. And once again, saving the best for last, Test Case 3 has the Auto Import card. And as the name implies, once this card is active, it will automatically refill any card that you spend in real time. So basically, once this card is up, for a couple of seconds, you get to just go completely crazy and just throw everything at the opponent if you so choose. And of course, it should be noted that if you combine the effects of a bookmark spell and a mana spell, the results are, let's just say, extremely powerful. Okay, now on to the final group of cards for us to talk about, that being the unique cards. These are 3 special cards that don't fall into any sort of category. If you could describe them in any way, I would say these are just very high utility cards. The first of the 3 is the Chaos card. And it is called the Chaos card for a good reason, because it is very chaotic. This is a completely random card. Now, you might be asking yourself, aren't Asuka's cards random to begin with? And the answer is yes. However, when you randomly get this card and you cast it, it will then turn randomly into another card. So it's kind of funny and weird in concept, but in actuality, this is actually a very strong card. While I did say it's random, it can only become 5 different random cards, that being the auto import, the regen, the overhead, the low rock, and the hell zone. So all 5 of those cards are very powerful. So when you see the Chaos card, you can think of it as, oh, okay, I'm gonna get one of those 5. So whenever you cast it, boom, right there, I got the mana regen card. So obviously that's an insanely powerful card. So good for me, spend it, I get to go crazy. Another time you spend it, right there it became the overhead, overhead again, hell zone again. As you can see, it is a random card, quote unquote, but at the same time, the outcome of it is always going to be something good and something favorable. Next up is the repeat card. This card, as the name implies, allows you to basically repeat whatever action you just did. By casting this card, you'll see that every card in your hand gets that icon underneath it. While that icon is active, if you cast that spell, it won't actually be spent. You'll get a free copy of it. So let's say I use it on this big cube here. Let's say I want more than one big cube in my hand, and I just like this card a lot. Boom. Now I cast it. The big card did not actually leave my hand, so I get to immediately do it again if I so choose. This makes every card in your hand even more valuable because, of course, the number of cards per deck are finite, so this lets you cheat the system just a little bit. And the final card that we need to talk about, the final unique card and final card in general, being the teleport. Now, this one is extremely complicated because on one hand, this is a very powerful card. When you cast it, Asuka will take this pose, and you can hold any direction you want and he'll instantly go there. Forward, allow you to go forward, and yes, you can cross up. Back will send you backwards. Up forward, up back, even down forward. You can literally go pretty much any of the major directions you want to go, which makes it very, very powerful. This works in tandem with spells. Let's say you have a fast spell like a water cube, you actually can instantly cross up and chant into the water cube for a quick mix-up. There are a lot of really strong applications to this card. However, All Asuka players feel very strongly about this card because there are 4 of them in your hand. So there is a high likeliness of you ending up with multiple teleports. And there's going to be a moment in some point in the future when you're playing Asuka and you're going to need an attack card so badly, but you're going to draw a teleport instead and you're going to miss your opportunity. And that is just, there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. So as an Asuka player, just be prepared. You're always going to have a, you know, love-hate relationship with the teleport card, because as good as it is, it always seems to just show up at the wrong moment. All right, with that, we have covered every single one of Asuka's unique cards. The last thing left for us to talk about now are Asuka's staves. We very briefly touched on this in the mechanics section, but now it's time to go a little bit more in depth and talk about what these staves actually do and why they are so good for this version of the character. So as mentioned before, a staff is done by inputting down down P or down down K. All 3 test cases have 2 staves apiece. Let's go ahead and start with test case 1. Down down P will summon the speed staff. As the name implies, this staff will drastically speed up the travel speed specifically of any cube that you cast. So an example here, let me do water cube, lightning cube, wind, hell zone. Now let's see all of those again with the speed staff. The use of this in a match is to basically make it more difficult for your opponent to attack cubes. As we mentioned before, most opponents who know the matchup are not just going to sit there and block cubes. They're going to 6P them. They're going to do special moves to fly through them. That is where the speed staff comes in. When you put the speed staff down, a lot of times it's going to throw off the opponent's timing and just make it really hard to react to the point where if they do try to swing into it, a lot of times they're going to get hit. And the notable thing is, we haven't talked a lot about cubes on a hit. In general, when a cube hits somebody, they flip up and spin out like that. The added benefit of the speed staff, if the opponent is anywhere near the corner, staffs start to wall bounce. Down down K will summon the slow staff. This is the polar opposite. Unlike the speed staff, this slows your cubes down, so every cube travels across the screen slower. Any blocked cubes become a guard break. So if you are at a pretty close distance, slow staff is actually pretty effective because you can lock the opponent down with cubes that are usually not that threatening, such as the water cube. We talked about how the block stun on it is whatever. It becomes a guard break when the slow staff is out. So effectively, this is a good way of potentially locking your opponent down, but just be wary, it is a lot easier for them to react due to how noticeably slow the cubes are. Moving on to test case 2. Test case 2 probably has the most fun staves of all of the 3 decks. Starting with down down P, you get the high staff. When this staff is out, it affects the gravity of any cubes that you throw. It will cause them to go up high in the air, as the name implies. So as you can see, this staff is pretty silly and pretty funny, but it is actually very effective. As mentioned before, opponents are going to be coming at you from the air quite a lot, and those who choose to do that, this staff can really catch them by surprise, because most of the time they're going to think they're safe in the air. This staff says otherwise. And believe it or not, that's actually not all. When it comes to the test case 2 staves, they don't only affect cubes, they actually affect Asuka as well. When the high staff is out, Asuka gets a super jump. You can see that he can jump all the way up to the top of the screen, which is a very powerful utility. Something to take note of is that even if you run out of mana, let me get my mana down real low here. Even if you run out of mana, this effect still persists. So I can have no mana and effectively kind of run away up here in the air while it's coming back. Down Down K summons the exact opposite. It summons the low staff. This affects the gravity of the staves as well as Asuka and pulls them down to the ground. So when you cast a cube with this one out, they will slam into the floor and bounce. What's really good about this one is it's similar to the speed staff in that it speeds up the cubes a pretty fair degree as well. You'll notice the lightning cube in particular travels very fast. Pretty much all of them do. They move a little bit faster towards the opponent. So this is a really, really good staff. The only true weakness of it is it makes it easier for the opponent to jump over. The trade-off, however, is this staff completely destroys low profile attacks. Moving on to Test Case 3. Now this is where things get a bit complicated. Test Case 3 has simultaneously the best staff and the most complicated staffs at the same time. So to start off with, when you input these staffs, let's start with Down Down K. They spawn in the middle of the screen by default. This can be controlled. Just like with the teleport, any direction you hold during the cast will move the staff. So if I do Down Down K and hold down, the staff is now in the middle of the screen on the floor. If I want to put it behind me on the ground, I can hold down back. Behind me in the air, hold back. Even behind the opponent, hold forward. And so on. So as you can see, these staffs are very complex because you actually get to decide where they are spawned. Now their positioning is very, very important because again, these staffs are a bit more complex than Test Case 1 and Test Case 2. With Test Case 3, starting with Down Down K, we have the Repel staff. When this staff is out, it will push any cube that comes near it in the opposite direction. But if you position it properly, it can act like a version of the speed staff where it not only speeds up your cubes, but it changes their trajectory. So you gotta be a little creative with it, and you can get some pretty good utility out of it. Also, if the opponent blocks any cubes affected by this staff, it will always pull them towards you for more pressure. It's time for the showstopper. This is the main event, and that is Down Down P, the gravity staff. Honestly, I can't say enough good about the gravity staff. I think this is one of those where I'll just show it off rather than explain it. So yeah, as you can see, it is an incredibly powerful tool. The ability to pull cubes in and change their trajectory cannot be understated. Anytime the opponent sees a cube coming at them, most of the time they're going to swing. So if you have the staff near them, it will often switch the trajectory up and end up getting them counter hit because it moved at a different angle they weren't expecting. It's especially powerful when you have the staff behind them because you can almost make your cubes unattackable by shooting the cubes past the opponent and having it swerve around and hit them in the back. Once you get a good handle on the character and a good handle on Test Case 3 as a stance, it's highly recommended to start mastering the effects of this staff because it optimizes everything. Asuka's neutral, his lockdown potential, just basically everything. It just makes his cubes way more dangerous and way more valuable. Okay, so with that, we have covered all of the major aspects of Asuka's kit, from his mechanics to all of his cards and how they work to how they even work with the staves. Now it's time to talk about something equally important. He can't win a match just with his cubes, cards, and staves. You're also going to need to attack, of course, with his buttons. Let's go ahead and break all of his buttons down one by one. We'll break them into different categories, starting with his neutral buttons. When it comes to neutral buttons, Asuka has some pretty decent options. Let's go ahead and start with the best one by far. You probably have already seen it. You probably already know what I'm going to say, but that is, of course, his amazing 2D. His sweep is by far his best button. It's possibly the best sweep in the entire game. What can I say about it? It is extremely long range. It does actually hit low, so it forces the opponent to hit low. It is a hard knockdown on hit, like all sweeps. And it combos into most of his cubes on normal hit. This is your go-to best friend button. This is basically the button you will be using the most. It is useful against opponents who are trying to 6P you. A very normal thing that is going to happen in most matches is opponents are going to run towards you and they're going to preemptively 6P because they are afraid of you throwing a cube at them. That is where you are going to 2D. 2D is your main starter for attack that's not a cube, and it's important to note that this is a projectile. So it does have the same rules as a projectile. In the corner, it will not push you back at all. So if you find like a comfortable position, you can continuously poke with this and go into your cubes from there. That's part of what makes this button so incredibly strong. Just make sure you don't get too careless at neutral with this button because it does have a ton of recovery, and if you get hit in the recovery, it is a counter hit. Next, 5P. This is a very reliable anti-air. Comes out very, very fast and hits a very good angle. So kind of like the opposite of 2D, this is great at intercepting opponents who are coming at you from the sky. Up next, keeping the anti-air train going, 6P. This is good at not only anti-airs, as it is of course built to do, but also just mids in general. Asuka has a pretty decent 6P. It hits pretty high above his head. It's pretty reliable, and this is just one of those moves you're going to be using regularly in the game anyway. And luckily, Asuka has a pretty decent one. Don't forget that 6Ps, in case you don't know, are all upper body invincible. So moves like this that are probably pretty pesky and hard to get around, you're going to want to use your 6P. And the good thing about Asuka is he is a character that benefits greatly from a counter hit 6P because you can cancel that immediately into cubes and just get full combos from it. Next up, 2K. This is probably your most reliable counter poke button. This button has a relatively small hurt box on it while having a pretty good hitbox. Again, opponents are often going to be running up to you and trying to 6P you or doing their best button. 2K is great for catching opponents who are doing exactly that. And lastly, you have your 5H. This is just a good all-around button to poke opponents at from a long range. It comes out pretty fast and is fairly disjointed. The tip of the blades on the end do not have a hurt box, so if you're trying to beat out a pesky button from far away, this is a great option for that. Because another thing I didn't mention about the sweep is Asuka's hurt box is pretty big on it, so that's another reason to be careful. So if you're in a situation where you're afraid that your sweep might get stuffed by a big button, 5H is a better option there. Not only that, if you hit the opponent on counter hit, like if you know for sure you're going to get a hit, your sweep on counter hit, since it is a projectile, does not give any sort of benefits. Your 5H, however, does. A counter hit 5H completely slows them down, so you get big combo confirms, and you can use the new mechanic off of it. Next, let's talk about Asuka's jumping buttons. To be honest, he doesn't have the best jumping buttons, but the ones he has are fairly decent. Starting with his JK, this is his pretty much go-to fast option. It comes out quickly, can hit pretty deep off of a jump, and is good for air-to-airs because of, as we said, it is pretty fast. The most notable thing about it, however, is it's your go-to cross-up button. JS. This is a pretty okay air-to-air. The hitbox, hurtbox can be kind of inconsistent. Sometimes it'll beat things cleanly, sometimes it'll just straight up lose. But when it comes to air-to-airs, it is one of your more reliable options due to its speed. Next up, JH. Now this is your go-to air-to-air. This one has really good range. It's a little bit slower, but it is extremely disjointed. So if you're trying to win an air-to-air, this is your go-to button. And lastly, JD. Your jump dust is your go-to jump in button. As you can see, this hits extremely deep and is just an all-around good jump in button. It can sometimes even beat 6Ps because of the fact that it hits so low to the ground. And to close out this section, let's go ahead and talk about Asuka's pressure buttons. Believe it or not, even though he is a mage ranged character, he does have some pretty decent pressure buttons. Starting with his 5K, this is probably his most reliable poke of all when it comes to close range. It's just generally very fast. It's got a good hitbox hurtbox ratio on it. It's good at counter poking. It's a good stagger button. And most importantly, it is a good starter to his chains. He can chain this into his sweep. So if you do get like a counter hit confirmed, you can go directly from this into a sweep for a knockdown. If it's on block, you can chain into sweep and then start your pressure with cubes. You just have a lot of options. But not only that, it also chains into his 6K. If you do 6K, this is a multi-hitting low attack. These little vines come out and they hit the opponent twice. So the ability to go from 5K to 6K instantly is very, very powerful, especially like when you stagger it. If you stagger this with throws, you can condition the opponent to want to tech. And because 5K, 6K has a built-in gap, it is very common for you to do this and then get a counter hit because the opponent sees that slight pause in between the 5K and the 6K, and a lot of times they try to swing, and if they do, you get a big counter hit combo cash out, and even if they don't, guess what? Right into cube pressure. Next up, 2P. This is your go-to lifeline counter poke. This is basically your reversal. Asuka does not have a reversal, he only has 2P. This is his fastest button, so when your opponent is pressuring you and you're trying to take your turn back, this is how you do it. You go for the 2P, and the good news is, something that really benefited Asuka in version 2.0, now all jabs are normalized. The fastest jabs in the game are now all 5 frames, which happens to be what Asuka's is. He used to be at a big disadvantage because there at one time there was 3-frame buttons and 4-frame buttons. So his 5-frame 2P in a world with 3 and 4-frame buttons was kind of miserable. But now that everybody starts at 5, it's equal footing for everyone, so this button is even more valuable for taking your turn back. When you are trying to take your turn back, you can easily go from 2P to one of your chainable buttons like 6K, or you can just go directly into cube pressure from there as well. If you do succeed in interrupting someone's pressure and counter hit them, don't forget the game screen will pause for just a second, and that's to notify you that you can extend that. So make sure you pay extra close to those counter hits because you can directly combo off of them. And of course, it's never a bad idea if you take your turn back with a jab to cancel it with an RC. Now, back for another round of compliments is 2D. 2D is also not just a great neutral button, but a great pressure button. When you're in the middle of cube pressure, this button will keep the opponent honest. Any situation where they're forced to block a cube, 9 times out of 10, the opponent's going to start holding up back. That's when you start introducing these sweeps. We'll go more into depth about this in the how to play section, but just keep in mind for now that sweep is one of the best ways of keeping the opponent from escaping your pressure, especially after they block a high block stun cube. 2K, this is your fastest low option. Just like 2D, it functions in the same way. During cube pressure, 2K is amazing because, again, the opponent's going to want to get away, but having the option to lock them down with such a fast button is very, very strong. And just like with 5K, you have the option of canceling it into 6K for that added extra stagger. Close slash. Not too much to say here. This is universal among the cast. Your close slash in this game is pretty much always going to be good. This is your plus button, so you can use this for staggers, set up throw pressure, set up, more staggers. It's really good in just about any situation. You can fake out a throw attempt with it. Pretty much anything you would do with any other character. Asuka's close slash works pretty much the same. These are universal, mostly among the cast. Making another comeback is Heavy Slash. This is your block string ender. So most of the time you're going to go for close slash. If you don't end up trying to break it up with another one or a staggered button or a throw, you're going to usually go for close slash 2S, which is also a low, and then end it off with Heavy Slash. So this is like your generic string right here. This is just a good reliable string because you can delay it a lot. You can catch buttons, you can catch people trying to jump. And the most important thing is, especially in the corner, after a heavy slash is blocked, it'll usually put you in the best positioning for cube pressure. It usually leaves you right around here. And this is sort of the sweet spot because from here, you can throw cubes, get the max value of them, and still threaten with the sweep. And what makes the sweet spot so good is that usually from here, the opponent can't easily reach you, but you can very easily reach them. And lastly, in my notes, this is where I would have talked about our Lord and Savior 6H. But go ahead and pour one out. We lost a friend when we came to version 2.0. As of this patch, our beloved 6H is no longer an overhead. This button used to be an overhead, not anymore. So when it comes to block string pressure, it's a pretty decent stagger button because you can cancel this on block. So you can do this into cubes. And something I should have mentioned about 5H is you can sneak a mana charge in. You lose your turn, but you still become relatively safe because of the pushback. So always keep that in mind. But the same thing is true about 6H. So if you work 6H in, because it is chainable off of 2K, 5K, and 2P. So any of those buttons you can work in a 6H. The good thing about it now is that if you do hit it, it is an even bigger reward on counter hit than it was before because it had a buff to its combo scaling and stuff like that. And it does have pretty decent pushback as well, but it's not an overhead, so you're not going to be using it in pressure situations as much as before. Now it is much more of a combo ender tool. All right, so there's only one thing left to talk about in this section of the video, and that is Asuka's supers. Asuka does have 3 unique supers that are all pretty important and all pretty strong in their own right. Let's go ahead and break those down. Starting with Super 1, the Super Orb. This is done by doing half circle back, forward K. When you activate this, Asuka will throw a gigantic sphere across the screen very quickly. So the note about this is it's not invincible, but it does function as a sort of get off of me tool because it comes out very fast. It comes out in roughly 7 frames, and it is a true projectile that the opponent cannot strike in any way. So in situations where you feel threatened, it is okay to just randomly throw this out because it's plus on block. It's a very small plus. It's only like, around +5. So, you're not going to get the most out of it, but you won't be punished. So keep that in mind. If you ever feel like you need a second to breathe or a second to gather your thoughts, you actually can just throw this super out and buy yourself a little bit of time and a little bit of space. Outside of that, it also functions as your primary cash out. If you're doing a combo or you have a wall break, this is the super you'll be using to break the wall. Super number 2 is the Super Cube. This one is done by doing half circle back forward P. Now, while that super may look identical to the Orb super, I can guarantee you it is very different. The difference about this one is he throws a cube and not a sphere. And now what's important about that is that because it's a cube, that means it becomes affected by the staves. So let's say I have a staff out. For this example, we'll do the slow staff. Let me put that down, and then I'll throw the super. As you can see, it travels much more slowly across the screen. This is true for all staffs. You can get pretty creative with these. And of course, his final super, his iconic harmonics. This is not only possibly his most important super, but easily his most fun super, and honestly one of the most fun aspects of the entire character. Once you pop this, you have the option of hitting any of the card buttons and swapping them. So effectively, you pop this super to not only fill your hand, let's say your hand is completely empty, you can pop this super to instantly fill it, but until you either run out of mana, because your mana slowly ticks down over time, but either you run out of mana or run out of time, you can sit here and tap the buttons and effectively choose whatever you want. So the idea is you want to pop this super when you have a bar, and then fish around for strong card combos. And the really cool thing about this super is that you're not limited to just one test case. You can actually press either forward or backwards to cycle through the different test cases. So once you get good enough at spotting cards, you can make a completely unique hand, or you can just go directly to the hand you want and get the exact cards you want and cancel it by pressing dust. This is the most popular option, just going and getting what you want quickly. That way you don't lose too much mana. Okay, so with that, we have covered all of his mechanics, and we should have a great understanding of how all his tools work. So now we are moving on to part 2 of the guide, which is how to actually play Asuka. In this section, we will cover how his general offense works, how to use his different test cases, his combos, his Oki, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and start going step by step and breaking down exactly how to take all the knowledge that we've learned and apply it to actual matches. Okay, so let's first start by talking about Asuka's general strategy. His general strategy mostly revolves around maintaining both his mana and his cards, which is pretty simple on paper, but where it becomes pretty tricky is when you talk about the aspect of adaptive gameplay. Asuka is an incredibly adaptive character. Fighting games are adaptive by nature, but the difference between Asuka and a normal character is you never really know what tools are going to be at your disposal at any given moment. If we take a character like Kai, for example, your tools are never going to change, and your general game plan strategy is always going to be the same. You have your fireball for when opponents are at a range, you have your flip kick to help you apply pressure, and then you have your uppercut to get opponents off of you. So at any given moment, you know exactly what tools are available to you, and you simply have to use the right tool when the moment presents itself. However, with Asuka, your available tools are shifting moment to moment. Not only do you not know what tools you're going to have when the round starts, but once the round does start, the moment a tool is spent, it will be replaced with another tool. So that's what I'm talking about when I mention adaptive gameplay. With Asuka, you have to constantly adapt to what is available, and whatever is available is what should be guiding your decision making from that moment on. So chanting is something we've already talked a lot about, but it's time to actually go into detail on how to properly and safely chant in an actual match. So to chant properly and safely, you want to make sure you're always covering yourself without leaving any gaps. There are pretty much 3 different distinct routes you can take to make sure that your chanting is very, very hard for the opponent to punish. Route 1 is to do spell, reload, spell. This is a very popular and very easy route to take, and it is pretty effective if you think your opponent is a little impatient. So as the name sort of implies, with this route, you would cast a spell, quickly reload it, and then quickly cast another in its place. Because of the fact that you're literally canceling animations, it's very hard for you to be negative while doing this. So something like a water cube, even though it doesn't offer very much block stun, by the time the opponent blocks it and you finish your reload, another card is already going to be coming out as long as you did it fast enough. So no matter what cards are available, utilizing this method, it makes it very hard for the opponent to counterattack. Now, the downside to spell, reload, spell is that this is the fastest way to burn out your mana. Because when you get down to it, you're essentially just doing spell after spell after spell. So you're very quickly going to run out of mana. This isn't as big of a deal nowadays, as we already talked about, because you do get your mana back. So depending on the situation, like let's say you're mid-screen and you're steadily pushing the opponent away, it's not really that bad because you're burning out on your own terms. Just make sure that if you do choose to utilize this route of chanting, that you are aware of exactly when you're going to burn out, because you don't want to overextend and get counter hit the moment you do, because your opponent will be looking at your hand and they will be looking at your meter. So make sure that when you actually do spend that last card, that you are ready to try to actually keep your turn or back off to a safe position to allow your mana to regenerate. Route number 2 is spell, reload, button. With this route, this is where you utilize a card that has a decent amount of block stun to literally cast a spell, reload it, and then try to continue your turn with a button. Usually that button will probably be a low, whether it is just your sweep or a dash up to K to D. You basically want to prioritize covering gaps with lows because Asuka is primarily a projectile character and your opponent is constantly going to be trying to jump out of your pressure. So if you're plus enough, you want to try to catch them trying to escape with a sweep. This gives you a lot of utility because a swept opponent is down for a while. And of course you can cancel your sweep into a mana charge and get right back on their wake up and start all over again. Route 3 is spell, mana charge, and then a button. This is very similar to Route 2, except this is where you choose to actually get some mana back. This is not a bad option when you have a high block stun card, like a lightning card, for example. Even from this distance, I can throw my lightning card, mana charge, and move in on Jam before she's allowed to move. So again, these are examples of adaptive gameplay. You're always going to want to look at your cards and discern what is the best option. Low block stun cards cancel into each other. High block stun cards cancel into buttons for extra pressure or into mana to keep your pressure going a little bit longer. Once you get comfortable enough, you should be able to mix all 3 routes into one long continuous string of offense. Okay, so now that we have some chanting routes to work with, let's go a little bit more in depth about the strategy and the mindset behind chanting and how you should be structuring your overall pressure. The best way to structure your pressure is to think of it like a priority system. You're going to have high priorities and lower priorities. The highest priority is number 1. The number 1 thing I recommend is simply keeping your hand as full as possible. One thing that you never want to end up with is this right here. This right here is when you are at your absolute weakest because you can do basically nothing except for your buttons and this. Now, this attack is decent and you can use it to end your strings, but you never want to overly rely on it. This is why you want to keep your hand as full as possible at all times. The max amount of empty slots you should ever have is 1, and 9 times out of 10 when you're about to burn out, you'll probably have only 1, because when you are emptying your hand, whatever the last card you spend is, I would recommend always mana charging after that if possible, because it's going to help you out of the burnout. Once you back off, it's easy to get 1 slot. 2 at the most. If you have 2 empty slots, that's not that bad, because you can fill that up pretty quickly, especially with a jump. Boom, boom, I'm full. But just always remember that your top priority while you're structuring your offense should be keeping your hand as full as possible. So it is okay to break up the rhythm of reloading to mana charge every now and then, which will result in at least 1 empty spot, but try never to have more than 2 at the most, because at that point you're handicapping yourself and you're vastly limiting your ability to actually attack. Priority number 2, we touched on this a little bit just a moment ago, but aim to use the right card in the right situation. Now, all 3 routes we talked about are under the understanding that you're actually going to be looking at your cards and sort of using them in a particular order. Again, if I have a low block stun card like this water cube here, it's unlikely that I'm going to transition from this water cube into a dash up pressure situation, because it's not going to give me that. So off of water cube, I'm probably going to go from water cube to lightning cube. Lightning cube actually give me enough time to reload and dash up for pressure, and then once I reach this point, I can continue my offense. I can go for a throw, I can put a button on their block and start all over again. You have a lot of options, but these options only open up to you if you aim to use the right card in the right situation. And priority number 3, the last one, is paying attention to your mana. Paying attention to your mana is definitely important, but the reason it's at the bottom is because now in 2.0, your mana is the most lenient thing about the character. So you should always keep an eye on how much mana is left. That way you can prepare for burnout. As long as you keep these 3 things in mind, your chanting pressure should be pretty strong by default. Just remember not to overextend. And again, when it comes to mana, make sure never to linger at low mana, because 1 bad hit could end the entire game. The last tip for proper chanting is something that we touched on a little bit, but it's basically just the idea of planning ahead. Planning ahead kind of goes hand in hand with the priority system and what we talked about before, using the right card at the right time. But more specifically, planning ahead, you want to literally save cards for the right situation. So let's say this hand right here is a good example. Now I have 3 regular cards and a powerful resource card. Seeing that resource card should instantly have a massive impact on my decision making. Because that card is going to refill my hand, I already know now that I don't have to worry about reloading any of my empty slots. So now if I were to do water into lightning, instead of reloading there, I could mana charge for a second, dash up to the opponent, get a block string going, and then spend this explosion into this reload, and boom, I have a full hand right in front of the opponent's face. And this is all because I actually planned that ahead of time and paid attention to what cards I had, and that affected my decision making. If I went the opposite way and I'm not paying attention, I could have just did something like this. I could just do lightning auto reload, and boom, I got barely any benefit out of such a powerful card like auto reload. I didn't get any mana back. I didn't get barely any extra cards. I effectively wasted it because I didn't actually plan ahead. This is even more true when mana cards come into play. Mana cards, as we mentioned before, are extremely valuable, so you definitely want to plan ahead and save them for the right moment. My main recommendations for mana cards, especially the low mana cost and the auto mana regen, is you want to use them when you have your most amount of mana, because that's when you get the most benefit from them. If you wait until your mana is extremely low, and then use the low mana cost, like something like this, you're not going to get any sort of benefit out of it. 2 casts and it's gone. That's why it's very important to actually pay attention to what you're doing and plan ahead. Let's say that I'm just on the attack here, I'm attacking, and I see, oh man, I got the mana card at this point. Let's see, my mana is really low. Planning ahead, I would get rid of cards that I don't necessarily want first. Let's say, let me just get rid of this water and this fireball, and now that I'm in burnout, I know that I have a low mana card ready to go, and now that it's ready, boom, it's popped. Now I can get some actual really strong, long-lasting offense going because I actually saved that card for the right time. Another great situation to save your mana cards for is when you want to pop super. Let's say that you've actually saved your mana card and build up a super. This is a good time to get the full effect of it, because if you use the low mana cost with harmonics, it actually slows down the mana consumption, giving you way more time to choose the cards that you want. This is another great way of capitalizing and planning ahead and optimizing your turn. Saving the right card for the right moment can literally make the difference in whether or not you close out the round. Okay, so by now we should have a great understanding of chanting and how to structure our chants. So with that knowledge, let's go ahead and dive even deeper and start talking directly about test case strategy. So in this section, we'll go through test case 1, 2, and 3, and we'll break down all 3 decks individually and how you should consider structuring your offense when each of those decks are equipped. Starting, of course, with test case 1. Not only is this the deck that you start every round with, but it's also the easiest deck to manage, so it is the best one to use when you're trying to get comfortable with the character. Test case 1 is once again known as the zoning deck because it has a lot of projectile cards, and the staves in this deck help you with just that, zoning. The strength of this deck is that it's very easy to use, but the weakness of it is that it doesn't have really any heavy hitting cards, so it is a little weak in the mix-up department. So the general game plan of this deck is to mostly focus on zoning while you build up meter. Due to the fact that this deck has mostly lower cost cards that you're going to be, kind of rapid firing, especially when you have low mana cost up, this deck does build an absurd amount of mana really quickly, especially when you get a long series of chants in. So once you get that meter up, it's going to give you a lot more options as to how to structure your offense. But even if you just want to save that meter up just so you can pop harmonics and go to a different deck, that is a good use of test case 1 in and of itself. So first things first, something we haven't talked about yet is general positioning. So when we say zoning with Asuka, believe it or not, I don't mean from over here. This is possibly the worst distance to be at when playing Asuka. You're probably going to want to go to this distance right away when you're starting them, because you're going to have trouble, keeping up with your cards and your mana and stuff like that. And you're going to be trying to keep the opponent away from you. Well, my early advice to you is try to avoid this distance if at all possible. This distance is very weak for Asuka for multiple reasons. But the main one, besides the fact that we already talked about earlier, the mana recovery rate, the biggest one is that at such a long distance, this is where your cubes become extremely reactable. The further you are from your opponent, the easier it is for them to see the cube coming and simply strike it. That's why you generally want to be closer to the opponent. You don't have to be right on top of them. The distance I would recommend is the tip distance of your sweep. As long as your sweep can still reach them, this is the ideal distance to be at in most instances with Asuka, because from right here, most cards are pretty hard to react to as they start up fairly quickly, and this is where it is easy to mistime a poke if they are looking for it, and even if they are trying to react to an animation, at this same distance, you can still hit them with elemental cards. Because on top of everything else, if you're in sweep distance, that means that you can still force them to block low, which means you can set them up for overheads, condition them to stand up to get caught by the low when they try to jump out, all sorts of good stuff. So try to keep that in mind when you're playing this test case specifically. When you're trying to get your offense started, try to stick to around this range. Okay, so now that we know the general game plan and what the test case is meant to do, let's go section by section and break down what spells are good in each part of the match, starting with the neutral phase. At neutral, your most reliable cards are going to be the Water Cube and the Wind Cube. The Water Cube, because it is so fast, it's going to be very, very hard for any opponent to react to it. Wind Cube is good for a variety of reasons, some we already talked about. The further you are away, the wider it spreads, so it's very, very good at catching opponents who are trying to jump. But another good thing about the Wind Cube is that it's actually kind of tricky to destroy with a button. If you have an opponent that likes to try to destroy your cubes, Wind Cube can trip them up, because even if the center cube is destroyed by the button, it's pretty common for the other two to still punish their button anyway. You can also enhance the range of the green cube by doing it in the air. It's really good after a backwards IAD because you're giving it even more space to spread out. And then from any range that this is blocked, it's going to give you a lot of frame advantage. So don't be afraid to cast this and move in behind it. Once you actually close the gap, that's going to be when you want to start applying your pressure. So your pressure cards are going to be the Fireball, the Low Spike, and the Overhead. Fireball is good once you're in, because it's a guard break and it's so big, it's very, very easy to just get your offense started off of this. Not only that, again, if you're at this range where the opponent is going to try to challenge because they think that you're going to throw a regular cube, this is a great way to jump scare them. And if you want to, you can threaten a throw here. Anytime you get this guard break, if you cancel the recovery of the animation with a mana charge, you are plus enough that you can throw the opponent even if they mash afterwards. The Low Spike is once again good because it's just a low hitting attack. You can work this into your block strings in a lot of different creative ways. One of the main ways I would recommend is after your 5H. After 5H, in most instances, you're going to be pushed away pretty far from the opponent. So from this kind of range, they're not going to be blocking low in most instances because they don't think that you can threaten a low, but that's the beauty of the Low Spike, is you absolutely can. So in situations like this where you do a string and it seems like your turn might be over, you can add a little bit of delay and you'll be surprised how many people you catch either backdashing, hitting a button, or trying to jump, and that's when you catch them by surprise with a sudden low attack. After the 5H, if they're doing anything but blocking low, this is going to immediately launch them. Finishing up the pressure spells is, of course, the Overhead. This one I don't think needs a lot of explanation. It is very easy to condition the opponent to block low, especially what we talked about earlier, using 5K, 6K, 2K, 2D, or just 2D itself after most of your pokes. A lot of opponents are going to get hit by you simply doing 2D into the Overhead, because of course you have to block low to block the low sweep. So this is just a really easy natural setup that's going to hit a lot of people. But once people start looking at your hand and trying to guess when you're going to use it, this is where 6K comes back into play. Doing 5K, 6K, or 2K, 6K is really, really good because 6K is 2 lows. So once the opponent gets conditioned to blocking 2 low attacks, or if they're preemptively standing up because they think you're going to go low, 6K is really, really strong. Next up, let's talk about defensive spells. Now, Asuka doesn't have very many defensive tools per se. He doesn't have any invincible reversals, so he has to use universal mechanics like YRC and instant block. But some of your spells can be used defensively. 2 Two good examples are the Fireball and the Earth Spike. Now, we just got through talking about how those moves are really, really good offensively, but they do double as defensive moves in certain situations. The Fireball is very easy to explain because it's just so big that if you see the opponent simply running up to you, in most situations you can just throw this out and it'll eat through a lot of buttons because it just comes out instantly and it takes up so much space. Also, if they're coming at you from the air, it can take care of that too. It even works if you're the one in the air. The same is generally true about the Earth Spike, just not as strong. If the opponent is running up to you, Earth Spike can be a pretty good jump scare because it comes out so fast, but it's much more effective when you jump. When you jump and cast it, it becomes kind of like an instant beam attack, so the range that it hits is very effective for whiff punishing. Next up, let's talk about recovery spells. These are spells that give you the option of either continuing your pressure or getting some of your resources back. For test case 1, the best example of this is the Lightning Cube. Anytime you throw the Lightning Cube, it's going to put the opponent in enough block stun that you have enough time to recover a resource and either dash up to continue your pressure or back off and get some of your mana back. Either way, you don't actually lose your turn, so the decision is up to you, and that's going to go back into all the stuff we talked about with moment-to-moment decision making and your priority list. Remember to keep an eye out for your test case specific utility cards. Test case 1, as a reminder, is the low mana cost and the auto bookmark. Low mana cost is very, very strong, even in this version of the game, as long as your mana is relatively high. This is going to let you keep attacking for much longer than you normally would be able to. So you can't really put a price on that nowadays that his mana regeneration rate is so low. And then auto bookmark allows you to fill your hand instantly. So again, this card lets you focus on mana recovery rather than reloading, and it gives you the ability to fill your hand back instantly. Both of these cards on their own are very, very strong, so always keep an eye out for them. And whenever either of these cards appear, they should be the highest priority on your priority list. And even better, the best thing you can do is combine them together. If you save up or you get lucky enough to have both, these cards synergize extremely well because in the short amount of time where you have low mana recovery, being able to refill your hand instantly is insanely powerful. And let's close this section out with staff recommendations. For test case 1, I would still recommend the speed staff. In my opinion, it is still the superior staff over the slow staff. In my opinion, since this is a zoning deck, having your cards shoot out like lasers only makes sense, and it does make it extremely hard for the opponent to counterattack your cubes at any distance. When you get into the ideal distance, cubes become almost impossible for them to counterattack because they hit them almost instantly. If you put everything that we just talked about together, your best possible hand is to have the low mana, the auto import, and the speed staff all out at once, because that will allow you to actually become a zoning monster. Next up is test case 2, also known as the mix-up deck. As the name implies, the strengths of this deck is its incredibly strong mix-up potential. It also has a great balance of different types of attack cards, and it has really, really good utility cards and staves. The only real weakness of this deck is that most of its attack cards are pretty short range, so you gotta be pretty close to the opponent to take advantage of this. But once you do get in range, this deck is very balanced and very threatening. So the general game plan of this deck is very easy to explain. It's just to mix up your opponent. With this deck, all you really want to do is to at least get into this range, or even more specifically, you want the corner. Anytime you have the opponent in the corner, it's a good idea to switch to this deck, because in the corner, this deck becomes very, very powerful and very hard to get away from. So just like with test case 1, we'll go ahead and break down the different areas of the match, starting with neutral. And just like test case 1, your neutral spells here are the water cube and the wind cube. Not to repeat too much, water cube is fast and easy to use, and the wind cube covers a lot of space. Strong pressure spells include the fireball. We already talked at length about this one. The guard break is great, sets up for throw mix-ups as well as just general pressure and general neutral control once you get close enough. The earth spike, you want to condition the opponent to stand up so you can hit them low, and it's also good when you use it after a jump. The overhead, really good overhead. We talked a lot about that one. Set it up with your sweep and your 6K. The main thing I should mention in test case 2 versus test case 1 is that in test case 1, you only get 1 overhead per deck and 1 low per deck. So those cards are kind of rare in test case 1, but in test case 2, you get 4 of each. So it's very common to just see multiple overheads and lows in your hand. Right here, it just, as I was saying that's a quick example. You can see right there, I got 2 overheads and a low. And when you have the overhead and the low in your hand at the same time, it's obviously very cheap because you can start doing stuff like this. Now, a nice pressure spell that's not in test case 1 that we haven't talked about yet is the electricity card. This one, once again, is a great fast elemental card. It's very similar to the fireball in that it just immediately starts up. It is really great at tagging buttons if the opponent is running up to you trying to 6P you. They end up getting zapped. The damage, as you can see, is very high. I'm using the level 3 version here because it's kind of common that you get to level 3. You're not always going to get to level 5, but you'll almost always get to level 3 if you're chanting a lot. So this is the baseline damage that it's usually going to be doing. So whether you hit this at neutral or save it for a combo, this is a great spell. For recovery spells, spells that allow you to apply offense and control your resources at the same time, you once again have the lightning cube. And in test case 2, you also have the big cube. This is one of my favorites. We already touched on this a little bit in the card breakdown, but this is just such a handy card because it is incredibly plus. This cube lasts so long that you can actually refill multiple slots and still keep your offense going. And in terms of offense, it's honestly just very powerful because it actually obstructs Asuka. Like, you can run behind this and it's pretty hard to see him. So if you set it up to where it's slightly away from the opponent before they have to block it, you can run behind it and be slightly invisible, sneak in dust, stuff like that. It is an all-around great cube. It works wonderfully if you're anywhere near the opponent. Your defensive spells, once again, you have the fireball and the spike. Very, very good to intercept rushing opponents. Both very good when used in the air. And for test case 2, we have another section to cover that wasn't in test case 1, and that is what I call the all-in-one cards. An all-in-one card is something that will cover every single aspect of the game. Neutral, pressure, defense, recovery, you name it. If you put this card out, it's going to take care of you. And you can already see it. I got the spoiler down there. For the test case 2, it is the fire cube. When the fire cube reaches level 5, what can I say? It does everything. I mean, just look at that. I think that speaks for itself. If you're kind of close and you want to get your pressure started, fire cube. If you want a good card to get some mana back before your burnout, fire cube. Literally, this cube does everything, and the best thing about it is it's very hard for the opponent to destroy this once it hits level 5. Because of the fact that it throws out 5 cubes in a row, the opponent has to do multiple attacks in order to destroy all these. So any situation where they do a 6P or a singular button or even 2 buttons, they're very likely to get hit. And a refresher on your utility cards for test case 2, you have the recover mana card and the random import card, also known as the shuffle. Instant mana, once again, you're going to want to save that for moments when you actually need mana. Right when you feel like your mana is about to run out, that's when you pop it, and boom, you get a healthy chunk of mana back. And you can even chant this. So in a situation where your mana is a little low, you can chant it and even refill the slot or do another attack, whatever you want. This is a very valuable card because it's just a good way to instantly get mana back. And it should be noted that you can cast this in the air. So this is your only means of getting mana back while not on the ground. So once again, very, very valuable card, very easy to use. The same can be said about the random import. Once your hand is full, you can just instantly refill it. And of course, using these cards together is highly recommended. Any situation where you're starting to get low, you don't have to worry about refilling your hand. You can spend the mana and then refill your hand all in one go, which gives these cards a lot of utility. Even in a situation like this where I burned out and only that card is left, all I got to do is wait for my burnout to be over, and boom, I'm right back in the game, and that even gave me another mana card. So you can see this deck is pretty easy to maintain. Staff recommendations. For Test Case 2, I don't have a clear recommendation. This one is extremely situational. If you have an opponent who is approaching a lot from the air, and you want to bring them down to the ground, then by all means start using the high staff because it's going to completely knock them out of the sky. And it's not just limited to when the opponent is jumping. This extended angle is also very powerful against horizontal attacks. Stuff like Johnny's Mistfinder in normal situations, it's very hard to get a cube out without getting hit by it. But with the ability to change the angle of your attack, it becomes harder for the opponent to hit you while you're casting. The same is true of the low staff. While it does inhibit your ability to jump high, it becomes really strong when you super jump and throw cubes down at an angle. You can get a lot of mileage out of this. And as mentioned before, low profile attacks can be very effective against cubes. So keep that in mind when in Test Case 2 because you can prevent low profile attacks entirely. And to wrap it all up, the ideal hand for Test Case 2, honestly, in my opinion, doesn't really exist. I feel like that's what makes Test Case 2 kind of unique. I wouldn't say there is one be-all, end-all hand for this specific deck. I think it's just more about the way it flows together. All the cards serve a function and kind of blend together. It's very easy to lock the opponent down and put them in hard to blockable situations. So that's kind of what the focus is. When we talked earlier about moment-to-moment gameplay, this is probably the easiest deck to pull that off with because you have such strong options on hand at any time. I mean, the fact that you can very frequently just from half screen drop a bowling ball on the opponent's head that they have to be standing for, or just hit their feet with a low spike, kind of speaks for itself. Just really, as long as you're paying attention and do what we talked about, using the right card at the right time, almost any hand can be amazingly effective in Test Case 2. Now, since there's no recommended best hand for Test Case 2, we'll end with this information instead. If you're in Test Case 2, there's a very neat mix-up trick you can do with the low staff. If you have the low staff up, because you jump so low to the ground, it gives you access to an instant overhead. Anytime this is out, if you do jump dust, you can immediately hit the opponent with an overhead, which is very, very powerful. If you add this in with all the other mix-up options we already talked about, Asuka effectively becomes unblockable when that staff is out. It just becomes too much for the opponent to have to work with. You can literally guard break them and then do an overhead. It's simply that simple. When the overhead connects, you have a lot of ways of comboing it. The simplest one is to simply just RC back down to the ground and combo. But if you have a fast activating spell card, you can use that too. And now on to by far the most popular deck. This is the deck that you think of when you think about Asuka as a character, and that is Test Case 3. This deck used to be known as the Exodia deck. The highlights of Test Case 3 are its insane lockdown potential once you get it set up. It has hands down the best utility cards in his entire kit. It has the most versatility, and it has the best staff. So there is a lot going for Test Case 3, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It does have a massive weakness, and that is that of the 3 test cases, it is by far the most unpredictable. But admittedly though, that's not as much of a problem now as it used to be, because as I've already mentioned many times, there are no staff cards anymore, so you don't have to worry about those. And then if you do get cards you don't want, the new bookmark allows you to simply get rid of them instantly. So the weakness of this deck has been severely toned down, while the utility of it is just as strong as ever, if not stronger. The game plan for Test Case 1 and Test Case 2 is very easy to explain and very straightforward. I even said Test Case 1 is the easiest to pilot, Test Case 2 is the easiest to balance, but Test Case 3 is by far the most difficult to use and definitely the hardest to master, because this deck, more than the other two, requires you to kind of be an expert at Asuka and his mechanics. The reason for that is that the general game plan idea of this deck is to sort of save up. I recommended saving cards in Test Case 1 and Test Case 2, but that's not always necessary. In Test Case 3, that's how you get the most of it. Card combos in Test Case 3 are what make this test case powerful. If you're not comboing specific cards together, then it's really not that effective. That's why I recommend waiting on this test case until you get stronger at the character before tackling it. All right, so going section by section, as we've already done twice in a row, starting with neutral spells. Just like we talked about twice in a row, your neutral spells are the Water Cube and the Wind Cube. One more time, Water Cube, very fast, very good for getting off and started. Wind Cube, very good for neutral, even better after a jump. For direct pressure spells is the Lightning Strike. The Lightning Strike is very good, but you only get a handful of them, and it is your only elemental card, so use it wisely. For recovery spells, we once again have the Lightning Cube, very, very good for recovering cards and recovering mana, whichever you need. The same is true of the Big Cube. For your all-in-one cards, cards that do everything you need, neutral, offense, defense, recovery, once again, we have the Flame Cube. Very, very good everywhere you want to use it. But one we haven't talked about is the Hell Zone Cube. This is pretty much the star of the show and one of the main reasons that you come over to Test Case 3, because this card is only available here. So when I say that this card does everything, it does literally everything. If you use this card from full screen, you can immediately get in and go for a mix-up. If you use it from relatively close, you can back off and recover resources. It works amazingly well as a recovery card. If you use it when you have very little mana left, it is pretty much the best burnout card in the game, because if you burn out with it, you can charge during that whole animation, and by the time it's done, you basically have your mana back. We even talked about how horizontal attacks can be a problem. If you cast this in the air, this is very good against those as well. You can even air stall this by constantly chanting to keep yourself in the air and not actually fall down to the ground until the spell is done. When it comes to utility, once again, these are the best utility cards, starting with the Mana Regen. Popping this lets you literally just go crazy until it runs out. Auto Bookmark, this one gives you a lot of freedom. Because your cards are going to be replenished instantly, you don't have to worry about doing it yourself. So it gives you a lot of freedom to either constantly just go forward and rush your opponent down at high speeds, or you can even focus on zoning and keeping your mana up because you don't have to worry about refilling cards. Teleport card. We talked earlier about how this has a powerful love-hate relationship with all Asuka players. The ability to move anywhere instantly is indeed strong, and when you combo this card with other cards, you can create some powerful mix-ups, but it is very common for you to end up with more teleports than you want. When this happens, make sure you shuffle them out. One teleport is good, although if you do have multiple, you can use multiple at the same time to teleport in multiple areas. The repeat card, once again, this one is very valuable and very self-explanatory. Anytime you see a card in your hand that you really like and you want to use more of, go ahead and spend that repeat on it so you can double it up. And the last utility card that we're going to talk about is Chaotic Option. Now, this is available in test case 2 and 3, but I figured I'd talk about it here in 3 since it's the same in both decks. Now, the thing about this card we talked about earlier is it is a random card. When you cast it, it's going to give you a random good card. But what's really great about it is in both test case 2 and test case 3, it allows you to kind of cross the streams. Cards that are usually not available in test case 2, you can get in 3 and vice versa. So if you use Chaotic Option, there is a chance to get the Hellzone card. So if you're in test case 2 where mix-ups are really powerful, suddenly getting the Hellzone there is amazing. In test case 3's case, it's also great because it actually increases the number of those cards available. Because usually you can only get one mana regen card per full deck. But since Chaotic Option exists, that gives us a second chance at pulling that card. The RNG is not super high. I mean, it's a 1 out of 5 chance. I mean, those aren't bad odds, 1 out of 5. So anytime you see that card, it is a good chance that it could be the mana regen card. And once again, the mana regen card is probably the best card in the entire deck. So all of that is to say, keep an eye out for that chaotic card. For test case 3 staff recommendations, this is an easy one. That is, of course, you already know what I'm going to say, the gravity staff. Nothing beats the gravity staff in my opinion. I already kind of talked about it in the staff section. What I would usually recommend is anytime you throw out a cube, accompany it with the gravity staff. What this is going to do is it's going to make every cube that much more powerful. Take the big cube, for example. Remember how I said it's not very good at neutral? That's almost always true, except for when you introduce the gravity staff. An extremely common scenario is for you to put this cube out. They know that they can run up and hit it. They run up to hit it, but the moment they get close, you put out gravity and they end up getting kidnapped into the air, and you get a long and hilarious air combo off of them, all because they saw a cube that was slow and suddenly it became fast. For test case 3 specifically, let's talk a little bit about card combos. I mentioned that in the opening to this test case, but card combos are very, very powerful here. So when you see one card, it's a good idea to hold on to it until you see a card that pairs with it. A great example of this is actually the Hellzone and the Teleport. These two create a very, very powerful mix-up situation. Because of the fact that the Hellzone comes out in 2 waves, you have wave 1 and wave 2. In between wave 1 and wave 2, it is possible to go for a mix-up. Because there is a built-in gap there, you can allow the opponent to block wave 1 and then teleport behind them for a left-right mix-up during wave 2. If the opponent notices that you have a teleport and they start trying to block this, you can mix it up by teleporting in the air above them for an ambiguous cross-up. A similar pairing that is very, very strong is the Teleport and the Big Cube. If you score a knockdown and put the Big Cube on the opponent's Wake Up, you can use Teleport here to get a very fast and very effective cross-up. Another great pairing is the repeat card with the mana recovery. Mana recovery, once again, being one of the, if not the most valuable card in the entire game. So anytime you have the repeater here, it's not a bad idea to save it for when you see that beautiful green card pop up. And then, of course, there is the most iconic card combo, the most powerful duo of all when it comes to Test Case 3 and the character in general, and that is auto import and auto mana regen. When you have both of these up for a couple of seconds, Asuka is honestly just a boss character. Until these two wear off, you can cast as much as you want without stopping, and your hand will be auto refilled. Test Case 3 is by far where I'd most recommend using your Harmonic Super, just because the combos here are so insanely powerful. For both Test Case 1 and Test Case 2, it's not really that worth it in the character's current state, but in Test Case 3, if you get fast enough and accurate enough that you can actually pop the super and navigate to the Exodia combo before the timer or your mana runs out, then it's highly recommended, because that combo is pretty much still just as powerful as it's ever been. One nice and easy trick you can do to almost guarantee you get the Exodia hand whenever you want it is to utilize Test Case 1. If you're in Test Case 1 and you fish for the low mana cost card, you can pop this, pop Harmonics, and it actually gives you extra time on the screen. You can see that you're barely losing any mana. So this actually gives you the true Exodia, where you have low mana cost, constant regen, and constant shuffle. So at that point, you are a true boss character. All right, so now that we know how to properly use all three test cases, let's go over some more universal tactics that you can use regardless of which test case you currently have equipped. Starting with everybody's favorite universal button, the Tap Dust. Tap Dust is good on any character as long as you set it up properly, and Asuka is no different. It's honestly a little bit better on him than with most characters, because with him you can actually mask it pretty well. When you're constantly doing all these flashing lights and explosions, it's a lot easier to suddenly sneak in a dust. A normal situation where you're doing cube pressure, and then you get something like that, it can be very effective. You can also use your staves to help you. Staves are very good for this. It's another way of adding to the mental stack. Continuing on with RC options, 2P RC is a great way of taking your turn back. In a situation where you're getting constantly pressured and you feel like you found an opening, 2P is your best way to poke out of the opponent's pressure. And if you do 2P RC, if it hits, you'll get a combo, and if it's blocked, you get to start your offense anyway. So keep this option in mind when you have a bar. 2P RC is a very, very powerful reversal technique. If you're getting pressured and you can't really find the way out, or you don't feel like risking that 2P, don't forget about good old-fashioned YRC. YRC, since Asuka does not have a true reversal, is his best way of getting the opponent off of you completely. He's honestly one of the better characters to benefit from a YRC because of the distance it pushes the opponent away. That distance, as we talked about, is your ideal cube distance. So you can literally go from I'm getting pressured to boom, I'm now throwing cubes. This is very, very effective for turning the tide and immediately turning the opponent's turn into your turn. But just make sure you don't get predictable, because if the opponent baits out your YRC, you are going to get punished big time. Another great usage of your meter is actually at neutral. We talked a lot about how Asuka's sweep is by far his best neutral poke, but it is a bit risky for you to whiff it because if the opponent jumps over it, you're going to get counter hit and you're going to get taken for a ride. Once you have a meter, his sweep becomes a lot safer because you can throw the sweep out, recover, and still be able to 6p in time over jumps. One universal area where Asuka is honestly a little bit weak is, believe it or not, in punishment. One thing that you can always use and always rely on is Charge Dust. Charge Dust is a fantastic universal way of punishing DPs and supers because it doesn't require you to have cards or mana. And the last universal tool that I would recommend using between all three test cases is simply just the super. We talked about it a little bit before in the overall breakdown, but this super is just good in general. Anytime you feel like the opponent is about to attack, they're about to rush you, they're about to throw a fireball, whatever, you can cast this, and because of that insanely fast startup, it is very likely to hit. If they block it, you're still plus, and if they get hit by it, it knocks them down and you get time to breathe. Either way, basically, if you cast it, you get time to breathe, and it doesn't really cost you anything more than a bar. So this is a good option. It's funny to say this on such a technical character, but this is a character where you can just randomly throw out super if you want to. And don't forget that the P version is affected by staves, so if you have a good staff out, that's even more reason to throw this. Round start option. This is a pretty important one. Round start is going to happen in every single match you do. Let's quickly talk about a couple of Asuka's better round start options. Number one is going to be 5k. This is again one of your lowest committal pokes with a pretty good hitbox hurtbox ratio. So at round start, this is a pretty solid option for a lot of different advancing attacks, especially if the opponent round start just dashes at you. That's going to be probably the most popular option. Opponents are always going to assume that as an Asuka player, you're going to start the match by running away and trying to just throw cubes at them. But as we established earlier, Asuka's best range is about right here, not back here. So you can often catch them off guard by starting the match with a 5k. And don't forget about the concept of option selecting. If you start the match with 5k, go ahead and input your sweep anyway. Press 5k and then 2D. That is known as an option select if you don't know, because if you whiff, you don't lose anything, but if it actually connects, you'll always get your sweep. Another great option is to simply walk backwards. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of opponents are going to expect you to immediately start backdashing, so they're going to play with that in mind. They're going to IAD, they're going to just straight up dash, they'll probably do like a lunging attack. Oftentimes, walking backwards, if you see them whiff, you'll have plenty of time to whiff punish or just start your offense with a fast moving cube. And in terms of round starting with one of your spells, the main two spells I would recommend round starting with is either the Explosion. Just throwing that out at round start is actually very effective because, as we talked about many times, it covers a lot of space in front of them and it is very, very fast. It has a pretty good hitbox hurtbox on it. And also the Water Cube. As your fastest cube, it just comes out so quick that it makes itself a great round start option. Just like with all characters, what I'd recommend for Asuka is mix up your round start options. Don't do the same thing every time. Don't be predictable. Don't autopilot backdash. Don't autopilot jump back. Don't autopilot 6p. The opponent's going to be looking for those things, and the last thing you want to do on Asuka is give up any free damage. Asuka's new move. We touched on this briefly in part one, but in this section I wanted to go over a few more examples of situations where this move is actually kind of handy. While this move is not the best on hit or on block, it does have some pretty decent pushback. So when you do use it, try to aim to hit it at tip range, because the further away the opponent is, the less that -6 is going to matter. So far, the most useful scenario I found for using this move is during burnout situations where normally you can't really end your block strings. Like let's say I do something like close slash, crouch slash, far heavy. Usually without a cube, the only thing you could do after a far heavy would be to mana charge, which obviously is not going to stop your opponent from immediately trying to take their turn back. There's a situation like this where you delay your string and you have that bit of pushback, it leaves you in the perfect spot to still poke with just like the last tip edge of the empty spell. And in most situations, if you put a huge gap between the 5H and the casting, the opponent is going to think that either your turn is over or that you're going to mana charge, and that's when this attack can usually come as a surprise. So basically, when you're in Burnout, this is a pretty good move just to make your staggers a little bit more effective. In a situation like this where you do like 5k, 6k, ordinarily there's nothing for the opponent to worry about there, but the fact that they actually do have to keep an eye out for this means that you could get away with sneaking in another one, you know, staggering just in general. Not only that, another really nice use case for it, and shout outs to Kome, the Japanese player of Asuka. He's amazingly good. If you haven't watched his gameplay, you should. I noticed he was doing this, and it gave me some really good ideas. You can manually leave a slot empty so that you have access to this attack whenever you want it. Let's say on round start, you simply get rid of the spell in the first slot, and you just decide not to reload it. Now that slot is empty, you can do this basically whenever you want. And the benefit of this is you can cancel unsafe animations into this attack. So let's say that I go for the overhead and then I reload. Normally, overhead into reload is just barely plus. The opponent can try to swing after it, but what if I cancel the reload into the empty spell? Just like that, I refilled my hand and still got some pushback out of it, and that pushback cost me no additional mana. So this very well could be the best use case of this spell. Anytime you're doing an unsafe action, you can cover it by simply using the empty spell, and you're really not losing anything. You're getting pushback, you're not costing any mana, you're still getting your reload. Definitely gives this attack some pretty decent utility. Okay, and the last thing to talk about in the general tips and tricks section is something extremely important, which is why I saved it for last. That is, of course, your opponent's use of 6P. Now, when you're learning Asuka, this is something that eventually you're going to have to really learn how to deal with and really overcome. When you start fighting tougher opponents and you fight people that know how to actually fight this character, what you're going to run into is that right there. 6P special move. Once people know the matchup and how to fight against Asuka, that's what they're going to do every time. They're going to stand at a range where they can see your cubes, and when they see one pop out, they're going to do 6P, and they're going to cancel it into whatever move is best at beating Asuka after he is trying to reload or recover or whatever. And again, that's something you're going to have to learn how to fight around. Now, the weakness of 6P special move is that it assumes that you're going to throw one cube and then try to reload. And usually you'll get counter hit in that reload animation. But what happens when you throw out multiple cubes is you'll end up counter hitting the follow-up in most instances. So basically, once you confirm that your opponent is looking to strike cubes, this should be your strategy going forward. This strategy is both stronger and weaker in this version. It's a little bit weaker because your mana is more finite, but it's also a bit stronger because you get your mana back by default. So again, you're going to be playing around Burnout, but it's very, very important that you shut this option down, because if you just autopilot throwing cubes and reloading or throwing cubes and mana charging, opponents who are aware of the matchup are not going to let you just get away with that for free. The second option you have against this is to simply not start your offense with cubes. Usually opponents who are using this playstyle, again, you can tell that they're going for this because they're going to keep the match about here. If someone is looking to 6P special move, normally they're not going to be playing you from this range. Some people will do it during a block string, like if you do like your sweep, they might 6P right there. Throwing two spells will still stop it, so that's not really anything to worry about once you realize that they're doing it. But the dead giveaway is when someone is playing at this range. So once you see them playing at this range, that's where your match awareness should kick in, and at that point you have to stop yourself from just autopiloting a single cube into a single reload. That's when you need to either double up or just fish with your actual normals. because as everybody knows, if somebody is going for a 6P, there are a lot of ways for you to stop that. Your 2S will get you a counter hit, and this is where your sweep really becomes strong, because it's pretty much impossible for the opponent to stop you from poking with sweep and poking with cubes when you're in this range. This is, again, why I've said many times during this guide, this right here is Asuka's optimal range, not back here, not right here. Right here is the optimal space, because from here you can threaten your sweep, your heavy, and your cubes all at the same time, and all three options are very difficult for the opponent to deal with. And if they try to advance on you, whether it is with a dash, a button, or an IAD, you have plenty of space to react to it and deal with it accordingly. Now, if you still find yourself having trouble with opponents who are constantly doing 6P special move on you, I'd recommend switching to Test Case 2, because Test Case 2 has the most amount of elemental attacks. So if you're fighting an opponent who is trying to 6P a lot, this is where your elemental cards come in, because again, obviously, you can't 6P that. And not to mention your staves, specifically your low pass staff is very, very good at tagging 6Ps. If your opponent is trying to 6P a lot, because of the fact that the staff sends your cubes into the ground, it'll usually hit the opponent in their feet where their hurt box is before their 6P can actually destroy it. Okay, we're getting really close to the end now. We have a really good understanding of how to use almost all of Asuka's kit. There's just a few things left to talk about. Next up, we're going to go ahead and break down his combo structure. So, certain cards will pop the opponent a little bit off the ground for a juggle, such as a water cube, while others will pop them up a little bit higher, but knock them away from you, like the wind cube. But then other cards have really good juggle properties and hold them in place, like the lightning cube. So depending on the situation and what cards are available, that will decide what combos you can do. Asuka has basically two types of combos: reactionary combos and launchers. A reactionary combo is when you are simply playing neutral and a stray cube hits the opponent from a good distance away. If it's a cube that launches them high enough, most times you should be able to react, run up, and get your conversion. Asuka's conversions, luckily, are very simple and straightforward. Any stray hit can usually be comboed with a simple 5K. If the opponent is already in the air, 5K will re-juggle them and allow you to pick them up with another card. So for example, I'm going to throw my lightning cube, dash up, and then relaunch with my wind cube. And it's just that simple. Anytime you get a stray hit, 5K to keep them up in the air, and then you want to quickly glance down, see what cards are available, and try to cast another card that's going to relaunch them once again. Of course, you can't relaunch them forever. Every time you juggle them back up, it gets harder and harder until they suddenly fly down to the ground, so keep that in mind. If you want to end Asuka's combos, the best way is with his 6H. This actually got buffed and nerfed in the patch, as we mentioned earlier. It's no longer an overhead, but it's now a much better combo ender. They sped it up. It used to be 25 frames, it's now 21. So it now comes out fast enough to easily end just about any route. And the great thing about this as a combo ender is, again, it is special cancelable. So once this connects with the opponent, you have a lot of options, the most popular of which is to mana charge to get some of your mana back for the combo that you just did. But you can also cash out, because once the opponent is knocked down by this, they are in a combo state before the hard knockdown state sets in. So as you can see, Asuka's combo game is extremely straightforward. It really just comes down to you and your reactions. Now, something we can go a little bit more depth into are the different sort of hit reactions with different spells. So with the Fireball, as we talked about earlier, it's not very good combo-wise mid-screen, But in the corner, it's fantastic because it wall bounces. So this wall bounce is very strong and very easy to pick up combos from. So this very, very powerful pressure poke becomes a very, very good pressure tool in the corner. The ground spike, as I just kind of showed off, is fantastic after 6H because it relaunches them back up into the air. The overhead is very easy to combo off of because once it connects, especially if the opponent is crouching and it hits them as an overhead, it immediately pops them up in the air. So once they get popped up, the Ice Spike is one of your best combo enders because it can extend a combo even if the hit stun is maxed out. The Big Cube is one of the easiest combo extenders because it lasts so long and it gives you plenty of time to do pretty much anything you want to do. Same is true of the Fire Cube. Okay, so all of those combos were examples of stray hits. What about launchers? What kind of options does Asuka have to start combos from his buttons and stuff like that? Well, the main option is always going to be, once again, from your sweep. Some cards are really, really good after sweep and will actually launch the opponent on hit from this very long reaching low. A good example of that is the Wind Cube. Other than the sweep, Asuka has a universal launcher in his 2H. A good way of setting this up is to do close S first. If you do close S 2H, this functions as a powerful launcher. When it comes to Roman cancels, they follow the same basic structure. The only difference is you usually get a little bit more of a float and a little bit more time to mana charge in between your extensions. Okay, so now that we have a full understanding of how Asuka's combo game works, let's go ahead and talk about what happens right after you land your combo, that being your Oki. So the nice thing about Asuka's combo routing is that it actually transitions perfectly into Oki on its own, and Asuka's Oki is extremely powerful and very effective without you honestly having to do very much. Now, the funny thing is, in the combo section, I basically already taught you how to do Asuka's Oki without even really talking about it. His Oki in 2.0 is stronger than ever because of the fact that you can end almost every combo with 6H. Now, 6H puts the opponent in a hard knockdown state, meaning they cannot tech roll. Because they can't tech roll, you can get directly on top of their wake up and pressure them in any way you want. So just like with every other section of the guide, Asuka has cards that work well in this specific scenario. Some of his cards function really well as Oki cards. For this example, we'll use the Big Cube because it's honestly probably my favorite card to put on an opponent's wake up. So for this specific combo, we'll go for a launcher, extend the combo a bit, knock them down, and then put the Big Cube on their wake up. And all of this will be good damage, good meter build, will maintain some mana, and they'll have to wake up into even more pressure. So putting that all together should look exactly like this. So as you can see, we were able to string all those cards together into one combo and put pressure on the opponent's block. And when the opponent gets up, We are in prime position to apply even more pressure. In this situation, it's pretty crazy. I have a guard break, an overhead, a low, and a bar of meter all available, and they're in the corner. So as you can see, Asuka's combo and Oki game go together very, very well. The only thing that you really need to worry about is what cards are available. And once again, as I've said many, many times, you need to keep the priority system in mind, because the combo that we just went over is the best case scenario, is using all your cards in the proper order. Again, I've said this many times, but you don't want to just randomly throw cards out. You want to plan ahead. That way you can optimize both your combos and your Oki and keep your pressure going, rather than wasting mana and wasting cards and ending up not really getting a good turn. And with that, we have finally reached the end of the guide. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Man, this was a big one. This was definitely the biggest guide I've ever tried to tackle. Trying to fit all of Asuka's information into one video has definitely been a monumental task. So I appreciate you guys being patient while I worked on this. I know this was a long time coming, but I am really happy to finally get this out to you guys. If you found this helpful at all, don't forget to leave a like or subscribe on the channel. I would really greatly appreciate it. Once again, I do stream most nights on YouTube and Twitch, so you can come hang out if you still have more questions or you want to see more Asuka gameplay. I still have a lot more guides planned for in the future. I will be doing a Dizzy guide, possibly a Zato guide if I get back into Zato, and I do still have more general guides planned, such as a Choose Your Main guide and a How to Play Strive guide. So there is a lot of stuff on the docket for this game. I'm having a lot of fun with 2.0. I can't wait to play more Asuka. Every day I look forward to playing more Asuka. I really like his 2.0 version, if you couldn't already tell by the length of this video. 2.0 is pretty amazing, man. I'm having a lot of fun, and Daisuke's vision has finally been fulfilled. That being said, that's going to do it for me. Once again, I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. You guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.